This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, make sure you check out my weekly Instagram Live every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's just something I'm trying to get in the habit of doing. Typically I'm recording the videos and I'm posting them, having fun on TikTok and Instagram and always back and forth on Twitter. The cesspool that it might be, I try to throw out some positivity on there. So, but the Instagram Live is something I'm still getting used to. I've been doing it for a few months now, trying to build up that audience. So check it out. It's a 15-minute leisurely, top of mind kind of conversation. It's totally not scripted, totally not prepared, just like I am all the time. And we spend 15 minutes checking in, talking about breaking news in PR, maybe what's going on that day, everything under the sun. And it's all right here from the PR Garage. So Instagram Live on my Instagram handle, which is at Jody Fisher, JodyFisher. Check us out every Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern. And let me know what's going on with you out there. Now on for our show today and our very timely guest. Matthew Krayton is the founder of Publitics, which provides counsel to campaigns at the local, state, and federal level, as well as to clients in the private and public sectors. Now, most recently, he worked on special projects during the 2020 presidential campaign, including Joe Biden's We Just Did hat. You remember that? Prior to founding Publitics, Matt worked at Fairleigh Dickinson University's Public Mind poll. He later taught freshman seminars for political science students and in the law and the liberal arts program as an adjunct instructor. He's currently an adjunct professor in Centenary University's business department, teaching their first of its kind social media program. Matt, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we thought we'd have you on because this is going to post on Monday, the 6th of November, and on Monday, the 7th of November, we should all be going to the polls to vote. So we wanted to talk a little PR and politics. I guess first tell us about your work with Publitics, what you do there and how you help your clients.
Sure, absolutely. So we are a full service public affairs, public relations, and political consulting firm. So when I first started out, actually, primarily we were doing campaign work. So on the local level, all the way on up to the federal level. So races for Congress, all the way down to town council. So since then, we've worked quite a bit in expanding our offerings and client base into more private sector work, nonprofit advocacy. And we still do a ton of campaigns. A lot of what we do is more or less political adjacent, I would say. So even if it's not purely political, there's always some political element or government element to it. So it's definitely never a dull moment. So what that means tactically is we really on the campaign side of things or political side of things, we really help deliver a message, craft and deliver a message for candidates and advocacy organizations.
The current state of politics, and I'll let my stripes show. I'm on the liberal Democrat side of the aisle. After having been a registered Republican for a long time, I switched sides after the orange one effed everything up. And it's just become an absolute cesspool, I think. And you've just now got this cult on the other side of that aisle that don't even know what they stand for anymore other than themselves, which is really not what politics is. Now, I'm not here saying that the Democrats have everything figured out, but so much of what politics is mired in these days, I think, is this cult of personality. Regardless of the side of the aisle that you're on, you're either believing in this one guy or you're fighting everybody who wants to believe in this one guy. And the business of the people seems to have gotten lost. What's your assessment of where politics is and what issues really matter these days?
Sure. I'm really glad you asked that question. And this is something that we have conversations about constantly with our clients and internally too, about the sort of state of politics. How do you break through? How do you make sure that your message is resonating with people? And I think a lot of it, I mean, our working theory right at this point is that we're living in sort of the vibes era of politics, right? It's vibes. So, it's, while I'd love to take sort of more high-minded approach or have a high-minded view, sort of the Sorkin-esque view of politics, or West Wing, policy.
I'm there with you. I'm there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Look, liberals dream, right? Like that whole day. Like
let Bartlett be Bartlett, right?
Right? We can actually get some things done. We can actually work through. So so that's the prism or sort of the working theory that we have about our political environment is it's about vibes. Because if you look at the major party nominees, presumptive nominees here, so President Biden obviously is going to be the Democratic nominee, and Donald Trump is very likely to capture the Republican nomination. Those two could not be more different, right? You look at Joe Biden, a guy who, for all intents and purposes, has Washington about as figured out as anyone in terms of getting stuff done. I mean, if you look at if you look at his first term, it's really honestly one of the most legislatively significant terms really since LBJ. Infrastructure, chips, lowering the cost of insulin. I mean, I could go on and on and on, right? So if we're talking about a battle of policy, he wins going away, right? Joe Biden wins going away if everyone was kind of looking to policy to guide their political feelings. Unfortunately, that's not what's happened. You look at the other guy, 4 years of basically nothing getting done, chaos, absolute discord within the executive branch, and then very likely we're looking at that again if he were to get into office. So really, again, if you look at like how to communicate through all of that, it's got nothing to do with policy, because because Trump voters and actually most Republicans, I think, if you ask them about what policies they care about, which if you walk out into the street and say, hey, do you think we should invest more money in infrastructure? Most people are going to say yes. Do you think we should have clean drinking water? Most people say yes. Do you think we should try to lower the cost of insulin, try to make sure that everyone has access to healthcare? I think the answer is yes, pretty much across the political spectrum. The problem is then once you start attaching the partisan lens to it, everyone kind of goes into their separate camps, which is sort of interesting. So to your point about cult of personality, a lot of it is driven by that, which makes the job very challenging, because I think the impulse among political practitioners and communicators is to want to communicate policy, which is very important. You can't completely ignore it, because it is important that people know that you're getting stuff done. But there's something else going on here that I think we need to be honest with ourselves about and address.
Yeah, I mean, that to me has got to be the challenge of what you do for any person who's running for office, any candidates that's running for office, is breaking through that immediate pushback when someone attaches a name to a policy. It's almost like, and again, both sides, I think, play this. It's just that I think, one has got a point and the other one doesn't. But as soon as you attach a personality to an issue, like you said, clean drinking water, great. Okay, so do you think that Joe Biden has done a good job on drinking water? Oh, absolutely not, the MAGA crowd would say, right? Why? Simply because Joe Biden, right? And it would work the other way. It's just that, the other way we actually have facts attached to it, whereas that other camp does not. But in any case, is that the problem with the problem that you face, is sort of detaching from that cult of personality? Or how are you crafting those messages?
I think that is the overarching problem with a lot of smaller issues peppered in there, that we have to deal with. When you're trying to communicate policy wins or try to communicate on behalf of a candidate, and really, actually, a lot of it boils down to even being able to capture attention to begin with. That's very difficult to do. So if you look back at 2020, and then back at 2016. So from 2016 to today, to the 2024 election next year, the media environment has somehow become even more fragmented than it was in 16, than it was in 12 and 08. So that poses a lot of issues because a lot of these things aren't even punching through as well, right? So like the question is, like, you used to be able to go on, do a couple of the Sunday shows, maybe do some cable news, and get broadcast news, and then pretty much everyone knew what you were talking about with whatever policy it was or whatever message was on the message calendar that month or that week. Now it's like, well, you got to do local news. You have to figure out how to do the broadcast. You have to hit the Sunday shows, cable, and then you're not even still scratching the surface of where the majority of Americans are spending their time, which is social media, on streaming services, and other places like that. So that's a huge challenge from a personality perspective. I think that so if you look at the overarching issue, that it's sort of a vibes thing, and like, how do you get the vibes right and present in a way that resonates with people? Then the question is, like, how do you present, like, how do you actually get that message, get that vibe out to people? What platforms you're going to be on? Unfortunately, I think the answer is you kind of have to be everywhere, and that's really tough to do. So
that's actually the antithesis of what we tell our clients as PR people, is you don't have to be everywhere. You have to be where your audience is, right? It makes sense whether you're trying to sell a widget or get donations to your nonprofit, or get people to buy tickets to your museum, or whatever the thing is. You're trying to motivate somebody. Fish where your fish are, right? And what you're saying is that politics is almost the exact opposite of that. You almost have to be everywhere all the time.
Yeah, I think that's true now, especially that it's even more important to kind of win the overall conversation, because that has a way of seeping into those different channels that we're talking about here. So, if you figure out a way to message things in a way that resonates with people, you'll see it on TikTok, you'll see it on Instagram, even if that's not where it started. Everything kind of has a way of spreading if you do it the right way, and that's sort of almost a full turn from where people were thinking in 2008 and 2012, and even a little bit before that, was this idea of micro targeting, right? So like, and this is still relevant in some ways, but micro targeting the electorate in a way where you try to target affluent suburban moms who drive minivans, who are particularly interested in X, Y, and Z policy, and that used to be something that you would try to do, and I think that's still important because everyone's motivated by slightly different things. But overall, I think winning the broader conversation in today's politics is almost as important as that. So it's kind of gone back and forth between those two things. How can we slice and dice the electorate into these tiny little categories? And then how do we message to each of those small little categories, given the tools that we have at our disposal for digital or direct mail or even addressable TV at this point? And then kind of shifting back to how do we win the overall conversation, as polarization has really pushed people into two fairly large categories, which is people who are going to vote for the Republican candidate, people who aren't. So that's right, or Democrats and Republicans, right? Which is a little bit. So the polarization is definitely more.
Well, and that's where I was going to go. I mean, if you believe what you read and believe what you see, and frankly, I think it's probably pretty on the nose in terms of where people fall and who they're going to vote for. Is it necessarily about informing and trying to win the hearts and minds of those who aren't on your side and trying to convert them? Or is it trying to motivate the people who are already on your side to actually follow through and get to the polls? Because I think the general observation about 2016 was that had more people gone out and voted for Hillary Clinton, she would have won. And her real failure was not motivating the people that were already in her camp.
Yeah, I think 2016 gives us some sort of conflicting lessons, or really a variety of lessons. So I think the Clinton campaign suffered a death by 1,000 cuts. So it was a little bit of that for sure, not motivating people. People were not super enthusiastic about Hillary Clinton for one reason or the other. Even Democrats included, some of the Bernie Sanders voters. And we're not talking about huge numbers of people either. We're talking about roughly 70,000 to 100,000 voters across a couple of swing states. In 2020 was the same thing, except the flip of that, the mirror image of that situation. So it was motivating, so everything matters in the margins now, right? So we're really talking about small slices of the electorate overall that are motivated by broader conversations. So you have roughly 6% of people, maybe less, it's in the single digits of people who are truly persuadable in one way or the, like actual people who are on the fence trying to figure out who they're going to vote for. Beyond that, you have your partisans, right? The people who are dedicated to coming out for your candidate no matter what. And then you have people who are in your camp, but not super motivated to vote, or maybe they're starting to feel a little bit apathetic or a little bit of malaise for whatever reason. The economy is not, where they want it to be, or their personal circumstances make them feel a certain way. So then you have to motivate those people. So I think in 2016, if you look at that race, it was a bunch of different stuff. Plus, then also add in that Donald Trump was able to motivate a large swath of people, or a large enough swath of people in some of these swing states that never vote in some of those states. So, like, low propensity voters were coming out to vote for Donald Trump, who were generally not engaged but in politics, but tend to be more conservative generally. And they woke up, they came out, they voted. The opposite was true on the Clinton side. On the Democratic side was people didn't come out and vote. And then you get little things like you had a certain percentage of people who were on the fence, but were probably, how they would characterize it, take their medicine and vote for Hillary. But then the Comey letter came out at the end. And so, you shave off a couple points here, a couple points there. All of a sudden you get what you get on election night. So death by 1,000 cuts, I think. So the problem is you have to do everything right. There's very little margin for error in this climate, especially given the way that the electoral college is structured.
Yeah, it is a drastically different world than what it was even 20 years ago. And 20 years may sound like a long time, but that's only a handful of presidential political cycles, election cycles. Let's shift to the messaging, sort of how you motivate people who are on those margins or apathetic, as you said. You're not even necessarily looking to change their mind as much as you are simply trying to motivate them to get them going. Are there ways that you do that? Are there messages, maybe not even a specific message, but more like a theme of a message that seem to be motivational or seem to work for the people you work for?
Yeah, I think the important piece is really trying to understand the psychology of these voters, the ones who voted for whatever candidate in whatever year and now are feeling not so great about how things are going. I think the first principle is lead with empathy, because if you go out there and like, for example, if I were to go out there and say everything is great, I don't know what you're talking about, you're nuts, no one's going to respond to that, because everyone feels everyone has their own personal experience, which is often times only tangentially connected in their minds to the political process, but they're still feeling that way, right? So inflation, things are a little tough there. Meanwhile, there are a ton of good things, as I noted a little bit earlier, going on economically, right? Job creation is very strong. Wages have increased at a pace unseen for decades at this point. So you would think that people would be feeling that. And I think people are feeling it to some extent, but the issue too is a lot of these policies sort of will have a lagging effect as well, where you start implementing, getting shovels in the ground on these infrastructure projects. Some have been completed already, but a lot of the stuff, the job creation, that'll come a little bit later. So they're not feeling it acutely right now. So I think you have to lead with empathy, and try to frame it more or less as a job not yet done. When you're an incumbent specifically, right? You're looking at the incumbency. So look at all of these things that we did. And I understand you may not be feeling it right now. And I understand things are tough, but here are the list of things that we're trying to do here. We're trying to lower prescription drug costs. We're trying to make healthcare more affordable. We're trying to make sure that you've got clean air to breathe, clean water to drink. You can put food on the table and have the dignity of a good job. at the end of the day, and protections at that job, safety at that job, right? So I think those are things where you kind of have to lead with that empathy and tell people that you understand that they're not feeling awesome right now. And then kind of shift into what we've done. Here's what we're going to do. It's not a perfect strategy, but it is something. And then also a lot of it comes down to how you say it too. So what is your personal style? What is the candidate's personal style? So some candidates can do a really good job with humor. Others aren't that funny, but can explain things very well. Which is fine. Like, not everyone is everything. So you have to kind of figure out what that candidate's particular style is, and then lean into delivering the message in that way, and try to create authentic communication to that candidate, because that's a whole other thing, right? If you're trying to force your way into seeming cool or relatable, oftentimes you seem even less relatable, right? And it's like, you've seen examples of it, like all the time during these campaigns where people try, they go to the Iowa State Fair, they're trying to eat
eat the corn cob and kiss the baby. Yeah, right.
It is, yeah, like Ron DeSantis, right, lecturing little kids on like sugary foods. Or so, oh wow, there's a lot of sugar in that. It's like, oh, this is so awkward.
Was he wearing his big white boots when he did that? I forget.
I think so.
Yeah.
Those skyscrapers on strapped to his feet.
But in all seriousness, I mean, how do you? And I pose this because I'm really interested in how you do your work. Like, how do you conduct the type of campaign that you were describing, where you're saying, hey, look, we put up some wins, we got more work to do, leading with the empathy. How do you do that in the face of just flat out lies from the other people, from the other side? I mean, it seems like every answer to, hey, we accomplished this, was nuh-uh. And in the most juvenile and unintelligent way to do it. I mean, there's flat out racism, flat out xenophobia, flat out anti-women, not even rhetoric, actual actions. I mean, look, I'm going to let it fly for a minute. The Republican Party is destroying politics, destroying the country, and their answer to everything is, that's not the way it is, and they just lie about everything. How do you combat lies with empathy, facts, with stuff that you think people want to hear? How does that go down?
Yeah, it's getting a whole lot harder to combat lies and disinformation and things that are communications that are specifically designed to tap into our basest instincts as voters, right? Because the stuff that motivates sharing, right? They're activating emotions and then sort of like contentment emotions. Activating emotions are anger, right? Like, so if you see something online, you're going to share it if you're angry, right? Oh, this really pisses me off. So you're going to hit that share button and it's going to spread around. So like there are a lot of structural and algorithmic issues too, like built into these platforms where information spreads. That create challenges in curtailing some of that. But I think one of the big things that we look at is creating permission structures. So finding ways in which to help people take incremental steps toward understanding that their experience isn't all that different from the people that they believe are accruing some kind of advantage that they're not getting, or that they believe that are fundamentally different from them. So that's something that we take a look at, is what third-party validation can we find in order to combat some of those things, because sometimes the candidate isn't always the most credible messenger for those types of things, because I mean, people view you are the face of whatever party you're running for, regardless of whether you want to be or not. And some candidates do a really good job of creating a strong personal brand beyond their party, but that's becoming more rare by the day. So what we really try to do, I think, if giving advice to any candidate is find those permission structures, right? Find people who can validate what you're trying to do and help them carry your message forward in an authentic way for them, that helps voters that you're trying to reach understand that they're not so different than the guy down the street that they think may or may not be getting, some sort of benefits that person's not supposed to be getting, right? Like, I think at the end of the day, fundamentally, most people want the same thing. They want healthcare, jobs, clean water, clean air, good stuff like that, right? Strong economy, that works, for the middle and working class. So I think like once you can develop those permission structures and people who look like the people that you're and sound like the people that you're trying to reach, I think that's one of the best ways to push back against misinformation. Because if you just say no, that's not true, you're lying, that's not going to really go very far, right? And then people kind of retrench into their camps, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's the end of the conversation, and that is a place where we can't end up, because like we started out this conversation saying, I don't think any one party or any one group of people has the right answer, and the whole point of our terrific democratic experiment here is that we all get to throw our ideas in the pot, and the best one rises to the top.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that sort of brings the sort of this idea of democracy into play too, like as a message. So like democracy being a vehicle for accomplishing all of these things that most people want. So I think that's the biggest thing that we think about when we're talking about candidates and policies and our general political environment today, is that democracy is critical to being able to accomplish these things and pursue these policies. So that's another area that we're thinking a lot about as well from a messaging perspective, is like this overall idea of democracy.
So in this last 24-hour sprint across the election day finish line, what ways do you think that candidates can be best communicating with those people who are either apathetic, not going to the polls, or maybe still trying to legitimately make up their mind about who they want to vote for? Is it social media? Is it like broadcast radio, TV? I mean, what is it in that last 24-hour sprint?
Oh man, that's a funny question too, because this is sort of the period of time where we start getting that question of what can we do now now that we've done it. So there are certain things, right? So I think the best thing for candidates, if you're planning on running for office, the best thing that you can do is make sure that you had a good game plan going into the final 2 weeks, and that you did everything that you needed to do before that. So late money is very tough to spend if you don't have it already planned out. So if you're trying to materialize, a TV buy right at the end, and persuade people to your position or to your candidate, or you're trying to figure out how can we drop some more direct mail in the final couple days, and cross your fingers that it gets there in time, which is a thing that we do every single time. Every election cycle it happens, where there are questions about like, hey, can we just send another mail piece? And digital, like if you don't have all of those things planned out prior to the last 2 weeks, and you haven't really litigated your case by then, you're probably in trouble, right? You can't win a campaign in the last 2 weeks. What you can do is really put the pedal to the metal on the strategies that you already had in place. So get out the vote operations, making sure that you are getting the mail out that you had in the hopper anyway, and really pushing on digital and using phones, texting, and other ways to mobilize your base at that point. So those are the things that I would say. But the biggest mistake I see campaigns make is they kind of wait until the last 2 weeks to think about the last 2 weeks. And really, you should have that planned out in the last 6 weeks of the campaign. You should really have your strategy in place before then, and have your messaging calendar. And that's not to say that things don't change, because campaigns are extremely dynamic in that way. Like, do you have to respond to some attack from your opponents, or is there another thing you have to contend with? But I think overall, that's the biggest thing in terms of mediums. Just from a sheer timing perspective, like digital is always the easiest thing to get up and out quickly. Email programs, texting, those are all great if you're looking for last minute stuff to do. Mail is tougher. Like if you're not in the mail the Wednesday before election day, there's a good chance it's not getting there. And then, there are all sorts of questions about what are you trying to do with that mail? Are you trying to mobilize people? Which there are very effective ways actually with direct mail to mobilize voters. But if you're still trying to persuade people, there are very few voters still on the fence in the last 1 to 2 weeks in the campaign. So I would say plan ahead, make sure you have your stuff, you're ready to go, your strategic plan ready to go. Check that messaging calendar, make sure you're hitting that every single week right up until that last 2 weeks, and don't leave any money in the bank. If you have a competitive race, spend every last dime. You'd hate to lose by 4 votes all to save a couple pennies at the end.
Not a wise strategy, but we hope that everybody gets out to vote. And I say that regardless of your political persuasion, we do hope everyone goes out to vote, because I think it's probably one of the best things that we can do as citizens of our country. You gotta participate, or what do you say? You gotta vote. You gotta vote, or you don't get to complain. But we do hope the right people win too. At least I do. At least I do. I can say that out loud, Matthew. Yeah. We are going to segue now into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast. This is where we steal a page from inside the actor studio, ask our guests a series of rapid fire questions. These meant to elicit a simple answer, maybe a laugh or two. Matthew Krayton, with your indulgence, here we go. Rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite news source?
I'm pretty traditional. I think I'd have to go with like New York Times or Washington Post, some combination of those two. Though I think Axios is doing some pretty cool stuff as well. But I would have to say I'm a sucker for the long form journalism still. So I like to dig into those long profiles and long well reported pieces. So I'd have to say.
Good stuff. We like things that are well reported. Absolutely. Rapid fire question number 2. What's your favorite social media platform?
I'm big on LinkedIn right now. So LinkedIn is great from a professional perspective. TikTok continues to kind of blow my mind as well. Though I don't engage in there, I spend plenty of time, lurking, checking out the trends, and so I would say those are the two big ones right now. And then Instagram is a close third.
I'm with you. Rapid fire question number 3. In your line of business, coffee or alcohol?
Coffee for me. Coffee for me. I know alcohol is definitely
after election day, right?
yeah. I'm definitely a coffee guy though. So definitely coffee.
Sounds good. Rapid fire question number 4. And this you probably have a variety of answers on. What is your favorite on the run food?
Oh man, on the run food. I'm pretty basic in that sense too. I would have to say just like a bag of pistachios or something like that. That it does the trick. Got a little bit of everything in there, a little salt, little protein. So I'm good with that.
Good stuff. And rapid fire question number 4. What do you want to be after you finish this career?
That's a good question. I do know that I would spend more time on the golf course, probably. So a little bit more time playing golf, potentially, but that's not really a career. I could tell you that I cannot make a career out of it. As much as I'd love to get to a point where I'm even a scratch golfer, we are nowhere in that realm yet. So I would say, I don't know, something in the continuing in the creative space, creating entertainment, content or something like that in that sense. But I love what I do, so I don't really see beyond this, other than maybe spending a couple extra hours a week on the golf course.
Sounds good. I'll meet you out there on the amateurs tour.
I still have a long way to go there too. So
yeah, right. Exactly. Well, Matthew, this has been a great conversation. Please let people know how they could find you online.
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. M Krayton, I believe, on LinkedIn, or Matt Krayton on LinkedIn. You can search me. I'm the only one that spells my last name with a K like that. Very interesting fact. So easy to find. Also, Publitics. You can put that into the search bar as well on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook.
Sounds good, Matt. And thank you very much for spending some time with us. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at The PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and on the web at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.